from there.
Well, good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome to tonight's webinar. My name is Robin, and I'm from the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action here in Victoria. And it's my duty tonight to introduce you to tonight's speakers. Before we begin, I'd like to take the opportunity to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands which we meet on this evening and um, acknowledge elders past, present, and emerging. And extend my acknowledgement to any traditional owners who are with us tonight. The speakers tonight are representatives from organisations that were successful in passing an expression of interest process to be project advisors for the Victorian Carbon Farming Program. These organisations play a central role in assisting landowners apply for grants to deliver their tree growing projects. So I hope you get a lot out of it. We anticipate the session will be around 1.5 hours or a little less than that, with around 30 to 40 minutes of presentations from the project advisors. And then following on, there'll be time for questions. One more thing before I hand over to the speakers tonight. There is our program web page, which is on the Agriculture Victoria website. So if there's anything that isn't clear for you tonight, or you'd like just a little bit of information on paper to digest it a bit quicker, we'll pop the link in the chat. So that would be a place to go to for that. And just another final word, we're extremely optimistic at the department at getting to this point. We're extremely excited. We're getting to the, I guess, the landowner phase. We've had a lot of interaction with our registered project advisors, but this is the start of the sort of the proper work, the proper chapter. So yeah, extremely excited to have you all here tonight. And I'm going to hand over to Sebastian Klein. Sebastian is from one of the registered project advisors on the program, Wood for Good, and he'll be doing the first presentation. So thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Can everyone see my screen there? Great. All right. Well, let's take it away. It's my part to introduce both the program itself tonight, as well as Wood for Good. So I'll do my best to represent the pilot in sort of how it works. And I suppose it's worth mentioning that it is a pilot, that it's very much a limited rollout at the moment in terms of the North Central Catchment Management Region. And I guess there's been a lot of thought put into it by the department. I think the announcement by the Minister for Agriculture was initially maybe in 2019 that there was $10.3 million available for carbon farming for some kind of program. And it's been in some process since then under design, and that of course through COVID and everything else. But I think as well in that time, we've seen various other programs announced. And so I'd just like to underline the fact that it is a pilot and that it's a learning experience for all of us as registered providers, for the department, and for all of you. So definitely welcome feedback in terms of how it's designed and how you experience it as interested parties, as landholders in working with it. But let me launch into what the substance of it is. So essentially, what's on offer is project grants for anyone who is a property owner in the North Central Catchment Management Region. The projects that are to be delivered have to be delivered over at least a 10-year period, so effectively a 10-year permanence in order to achieve the full amount of funding from the program. The carbon in your project is modelled using FullCam, which is the software that is being designed by the Federal Department of Environment to be used in the Emissions Reduction Fund. So it's very robust. There's a lot of science that sits behind it, and the modelling that goes into it, the algorithms, the equations are quite complex, and it's quite involved to actually use that. The registered project advisors, of which there are 3 of us tonight, there is a 4th one, being Greening Australia. I did reach out to them, but they haven't seen fit to reach back and talk about presenting tonight. Is responsible for submitting the application and a declaration, a legal document, to receive the grant funding. And the pilot has been designed to, I guess, apply to a range of different planting projects. So that can be shelter belts, woodlots, or block plantings. And the trees planted under the program can be utilised for their timber, for either commercial sales or on-farm uses, but they mustn't be harvested for that purpose in the first 10 years. And there's a note here from the department that the CMA is not actually a part of the project, that is simply the region they've used for the initial rollout. And so, yeah, this material I've sort of just copied and pasted from publicly available material on the website. If you use the link that Robin mentioned, then you should be able to read any of this stuff pretty readily. And so step one is to contact a registered project advisor who will help landholders to understand the potential for the carbon farming project and the carbon yield. We then work together to develop a joint project agreement. And then we work with landowners to develop a project plan, which will outline the management approach for at least that 10-year period as per the program guidelines. Once the project is registered, project advisors will work to understand mutual obligations, develop the application specifically to the program pilot, and then submit all the documentation on behalf of the property owner and the project, including maps and associated spatial data. There's some pretty clear guidelines in the project guidelines about how that will go. And then geo-reference photos, and so evidence that the trees have been planted, or evidence that can be used as a point against which. So if there's no trees in the first photos, then further down the track we can share photos with the trees. And then a simple cash flow model showing all project expenditure and the agreed cost share between the registered project advisor and the landowner. So I guess it's worth just underlining there, and this might come up a bit in the presentations, that the funding is available to the landholder. That's a direct arrangement between the government, between the department and the landholder. And then there's a separate arrangement between the landholder and the project advisor, which includes what the transaction would be in that relationship as well. Next is all eligible and fully completed joint project applications received by the department will be assessed by a panel, and that against criteria set out in the project guidelines. The panel may make recommendations for offers of funding to the Minister of Agriculture for final consideration. The decision to offer grant funding is at the discretion of the authorised approver. So that's whoever ends up making the decision in government. And then finally, the department will endeavour to notify applicants within or in approximately 12 weeks from the point of submitting the joint application. If the grant is successful, project advisors will help landholders to implement and manage their tree planting projects over 10 years. And so this is just some of the other information that's available in those guidelines. The project size, the range that has been decided by the department is as small as you can think of, so 0 hectares through to 100 hectares. If it's over 100 hectares, then there's possibly federal government grants and other sources you might look for support for your project. But I think the assumption was that if it's over 100 hectares, then it probably is eligible for the federal government emissions reduction fund and perhaps other sources of funding. And so that's why the department is really focused on this sort of window. There's actually very few carbon projects registered in Victoria. There's a range of reasons for that probably. One of them is generally smaller lot holdings, also a higher capital value of land. And so this is very much from the government's point of view, looking to stimulate growth in carbon yields across the state. You can also see here that the amount available, the maximum amount available per hectare, is stepped down according to the size of the property. So project sizes between 0 and 20 hectares are eligible for up to $5,000 per hectare, the maximum amount being achieved if there is that much carbon modelled by full cam. And so down at the bottom here, you can see that there's $25 per tonne available. At up to 20 hectares, that maxes out at $5,000 per hectare. Up to 50 hectares from 20, it maxes out at $3,000 per hectare. And between 51 hectares and 100 hectares of project area, that maxes out at $2,500 per hectare. And so that, given that we're talking about $25 per tonne of CO2 equivalent, would indicate that there's approximately 100 tonnes per hectare of carbon being generated in that project. If there's more than that, then it won't be able to achieve any further funding from the state government. I guess a proviso there beyond that is that if it's not inside an NPI region, that's a National Plantation Inventory region, or if the species planted isn't listed in the modelling software, FullCam, then there is an additional rate that's calculated. And this is a recognition by the state government as well, that growing trees outside of those National Plantation Inventory regions is a little bit more difficult. And this is just an outline of the project reporting that's required. So the state government wants to know, A, that a project has been conducted, and B, that it's been successful. And so there is a year zero reporting requirement. That's effectively a baseline that includes the activities against the project plan that are planned, and then photos of the proposed area for the activities. And that might even include some of the ground prep at this point. And it must be submitted, that report, in the event of disturbance or any material change to the project occurring. As an update report has to be triggered if there is any loss of trees, a windstorm, or animal damage, or whatever it might be. Year 3 is another reporting period that is requested by the department, showing a successful establishment, which is needs to have enough establishment that there will be at least 20% of canopy cover, I think, is what's articulated in the guidelines at maturity. Then there's another progress report at 5 years and another at 10 years. And again, each of these requires evidence of the trees growing, photos, any other evidence that matters, drone imagery or even satellite imagery, and obviously all of those geolocated. And then further, if there's any impacts on either unintentional or intentional, those have to be documented as well. So that could be, as mentioned earlier, damage from wildlife or animals. It could also be thinning or pruning that has been undertaken as part of the project plan as well. And then this is just one example of a hypothetical project. This one's 20 hectares of sugar gum for a woodlot in Clunes, and it demonstrates how the funding is made available from the state government. So you get 40% of the available funding at year 1, 10% of the available funding at year 3, and then further funding at year 5 and year 10. And then it's up to the relationship, up to the agreement between the landowner and the registered provider as to how that is attributed. So as to how much the landowner would like to keep and how much the registered project advisor would like to keep. And then at the end, there's a total amount. And so in this instance, there's just over 4,000 tonnes, or nearly 4,500 tonnes of CO2 sequestered, CO2 equivalent. The state government is paying $25 per tonne. And so that works out to be $100,000, which is maxed out at the $5,000 per hectare amount there to give us a yield of $100,000. And so that's basically the overview of the program. There is more details on the website, and certainly you can reach out to the department for further advice on the detail and how it works. You can also reach out to the project advisors to walk through it together as well. I think if it's all right, we're saving questions until the end of the presentations, and so I'll jump onto the Wood for Good side of the presentation now, if that's all right with everyone out there.
Thanks, Seb.
No worries. So launching straight into the Wood for Good side of things, we're talking about regenerative forestry and the Victorian Carbon Farming Program pilot. And a little bit about our company. We manage about 500 hectares of mixed species durable native hardwoods. And essentially, these were established for plantations for the production of timber in the late 90s and early 2000s. And the business was really started to manage these plantations as they matured. It was initially just looking at marketing the thinnings from these plantations. You establish plantations for timber at a high stocking density and thin them back so that those trees can grow bigger, and you can select the best trees for saw logs and for different uses, perhaps fencing or landscaping. And so you've got this yield early in the project life cycle of the thinner trees that you're taking out from the plantation. And so the business was really started to market that wood. In the process of doing that, we discovered that there was actually a real benefit from an ecological point of view in managing those trees. And particularly my colleague Ben, who's on the Zoom tonight, as a keen naturalist, observed that as you release that pressure between the trees, then more grasses would come in, more understory would start to regenerate. And you'd also see more diversity of insects and other birds and mammals and animals moving in. And you'd see this more complexity added in. And so while it might have been started as something that looked very much like a plantation, as it's matured and as it is managed, it actually acts and functions more like a forest, albeit that one that also has timber and other outputs as well. And so this really gave rise to this idea of regenerative forestry, the idea that you can establish and manage a plantation on degraded land for a net gain of carbon and biodiversity, as well as carbon-rich and sustainable regenerative wood products. And so we're calling this regenerative forestry because it's about regenerating the land with a land use that actually provides those other benefits as well. And the idea is that we never clear fell those trees, that we selectively thin them over time, and that they're allowed to grow back either from the stumps or from seed that's generated in the soil as well. And so you've got effectively what becomes a perpetual source of not only timber and wood products, but also a perpetual habitat and source of carbon for the greater atmosphere and the wider community. And sort of as a regenerative business, we believe that it's our role to function as a business in a way that actually restores the functioning of critical biological systems for us on the planet and for the other living things. And so this is, I guess, a good little visual graphic of how that works. And so you can see lots of small trees at the beginning as they grow. And here we've got the 10-year period at which we've finished that opening decade of the registration with the carbon farming program. And as we thin those out, that actually allows for a more diverse and multifunctional biodiversity and ecology to evolve. And so our aim is to measure this and monitor it over time with the landowners and to actually document those biodiversity changes. And as I said, to avoid clear felling and to establish something that will be a perpetual source of renewable, clean products into the future. And so how we're working with the VCFP, we're very much a commercial business. And so we have to both save the world as well as make a buck. And so how we've structured working with the VCFP is that we'll engage with a preliminary phone call and consultation on the phone or online via Zoom. And that'll be after the project proponent has made contact with us. And that's to discuss your goals, your aspirations for your project, the soil type, which area and region you're in, the climate, and whether or not you're in one of those national plantation inventory regions. And then our first visit to your site involves an initial consultation. That's generally about $600 plus travel. And from that, we will actually produce a 2 to 3 page report. And that'll basically document details of both the property itself, the context, the site context, the soil, rainfall, any other factors that need to be considered, as well as your intentions and aspirations for the project and the property as well. We'll then drill down into the carbon yields and the costs and benefits of a project there, which gives you a go, no go option to actually undertake a project registration with the VCFP. And I suppose it's worth underlining that carbon modelling is quite an extensive process. That involves some fairly technical knowledge and engaging with some fairly obscure software through the FullCAM model that I mentioned earlier when I was presenting on the program itself. In the following spring from that project registration is when we aim to do establishment. There's a range of things that we do slightly differently to some other contractors and companies out there to make sure that the establishment phase is as successful as possible. And really, we claim broadly to have something like an 85% success rate if we're able to control some of those variables that are really important to getting those factors correct. And so that includes planting in spring. We're looking for a window after the hard frosts and while there's still soil moisture. And there's a range of interventions that we do in terms of site preparation as well. And then we undertake reporting with you through the years from that project establishment, which has obviously come with a report at the beginning, but then through years 2 to 10, we both undertake that reporting, but are also able to come back and undertake the maintenance of that project such that you're actually getting to the point where those trees will be optimal from a timber point of view, and that we're setting it up for the best success possible into the future. And what to expect? Well, on the left, we have an empty paddock in Crosby, which is near Heathcote, to the east of Bendigo. And on the right, we actually have the same paddock just 17 years later. And so this is an example of a regenerative forestry site. And it demonstrates what that design, what that soil preparation, what that expertise that we bring to the project can provide. And so you see a sugar gum dominated overstory there, but you can also see coppice regrowth of smaller trees that have been already either thinned or harvested for firewood or for posts and poles. But you also see that restoration of an understory that's coming back. You can see 2 or 3 different species of wattle. You can see Cassinia there and wallaby grass, maybe some spear grass as well. And so that's, I guess, the before and after of the wood for good approach. And so I suppose in terms of what we offer to landholders is not just the carbon and not just the biodiversity, but is the opportunity to actually produce a resource and to have a resource on your property that can be utilised. And so that doesn't necessarily mean harvesting it all in 1 year. In fact, we would advise against that. It can mean harvesting parts of it gradually, or even working it in with your farm enterprise as well, such that in good years where the farm enterprise is going well, maybe you don't bother too much with harvesting and selling any wood products. But perhaps in drier years, perhaps when you've had to destock, or perhaps when the crops haven't gone as well, then there's an opportunity to perhaps harvest a bit more and to augment that farm income, or potentially just as an investment. You know, you've got both the amenity of a treed property, but also the opportunity then to harvest trees if and when you feel like it. I certainly know of one chap down in Newbury here with a Eucalyptus nitens plantation, and his retirement hobby is very much harvesting and processing firewood for the local community, and he sells that at a price that I can only imagine means that he's doing it for love rather than money. So it gives you a lot of options and ways to engage with your community, and also to be, I think, providing a sustainable, renewable product as well. And so that's the Wood for Good story. Take those details down now if you would like, or of course make contact through the details on the website. And with that, I'll stop sharing, and thank you all very much. And hand over to, is it you, Joe, or is it you, Andrew?
Joe, I've managed to get your slides, so I can bring them up on
you.
screen if you'd like to talk to them. And Seb, there's a great question in the chat, but I guess we'll go through everybody and then maybe you can answer that for them. Joe, are you happy to go next? I'll put you up.
That's good. Thank you.
Give us a sec.
Thanks, Sebastian. Thanks, Andrew and Robin. Good evening, everyone. As introduced, Joanne Roberts from the Victorian Carbon Farming Project for Tree Project. And my job just over the next few minutes is just to give you a little bit of information about the organisation itself, if you don't already know about Tree Project, and how we operate with landowners who source their trees from us. So this first slide is really letting you know that Tree Project has been in operation for over 30 years. And over that time, over 2 million trees have been planted by landowners who bought their trees from Tree Project. And in the last growing season, 2023, I know that we actually propagated and distributed 134,000 seedlings from volunteer growers. So as a non-profit, non-government, volunteer-based organisation, we're able to provide sort of low-cost Indigenous mixed species seedlings to landowners that are wanting to do some repair work on their properties, damaged, fragmented habitats. We want to create wildlife corridors, repair any waterways, and improve and increase the habitat for birds and animals. And particularly in this project, through the VCFP, we're looking to establish riparian buffers and shelter belts on your properties. If you think that Tree Project, sorry, you can go to the next one, thanks. If you think that Tree Project might be the RPA that best suits your needs and interests, this slide is just about some of the practical implications and arrangements that you need to take into account in your planning and costing for your participation in this project. What happens is that over the next few months, you would contact Tree Project via me, and we would start, as Sebastian said, a planning project with you, meeting with you, visiting the property, phone, Zoom, whatever it takes to get an idea of your property and what you're hoping to achieve and the vision you have for it. And then we would need to get any orders, mainly for canopy trees, into Tree Project by September of this year. And then that would give the Tree Project time and its timeline to get all the seeds ordered from the various seed banks, to get the volunteers in to pack those seeds, to produce the grower kits, to work at the depot around the kits, so that by November this year and January next year, the autumn and spring kits go out to the volunteer growers. We just need you to probably put in an order of at least 2,000 seedlings. As you can see, if we've grown 34,000 seedlings, we can handle much bigger numbers, but to be part of the project with us, we would need to have an order of at least 2,000 seedlings. We would like you to know that the site preparation is the responsibility of the landowners, and as is the planting of the trees and the collection of the trees from the central distribution points that Tree Project organises. In the planning phase, you'd have access to our online resources, the manuals, written documentation, advice, databases, and certainly species experts that we can connect you to. We like to set up a team between the landowners, the local land care groups, and Tree Project. So as a collaborative group, we would do the planning and get the orders into Tree Project in the city by September. Perhaps the next slide, please, if you could just click. At the moment, as well as working for the VCFP, I'm also one of Tree Project's volunteer growers. So as we speak tonight, my kit of 350 trees is in my backyard growing. And as a volunteer organisation, we are connected to, I think, over 100 organisations and corporations and businesses across Victoria, where employers often give their employees a day volunteering with us. So it might be, given we can sort of discuss where you are, what time you need to plant, how many trees you do have to plant, but we can sometimes help with distribution and with planting of trees, if that's something that would be of use to you. So I'm working with 6 volunteer growers in my little team, and we have a mentor. This is my 4th year growing for Tree Project, and some of the growers have been growing for 20 plus years, growing kits of 350 trees each. My trees are going out to Kyneton this year in May, and I'm hoping to be part of the planting as well, which is always nice. So we have a lot of involvement and connection to our seedlings and our product that we produce at Tree Project. Tree Project trains all its volunteer growers so that there's some quality control around the trees that you're receiving for your properties. So please give me a call. There's my email address and my phone number if you'd like Tree Project to come and have a discussion with you and to start some planning. And please go on to the Tree Project website when you can have a look at the resources we have available for landowners. And also you can have a longer look and a view at our mission statement and our values and our vision for the organisation. Thank you.
Sorry, better unmute. Hi,
Oh.
everybody. Yeah. I'm Andrew Ward, Wardy. Can I just say thanks to Seb for doing such a great introduction, and Wood for Good and Tree Project are two really great RPAs. We're a third alternative, also selected as an RPA. And if you'd allow me, I'd like to spend 5 or 10 minutes to talk through what Regen Farmers Mutual has to offer, and compare and contrast, I guess, with the other RPAs. So thank you for having me. As mentioned, my name's Andrew Ward, but I tend to go by Wardy. There's too many Andrews in the world. I work with Regen Farmers Mutual. We're farmer owned, and within what we're trying to do is help farmers kind of navigate what we see as the convergence of agriculture and climate markets. And this is most pronounced in the way that supply chains are asking increasingly for farmers, not just to provide, tons of wheat, wool, or beef, but also to report on the impacts of that production on climate and environment. And we're just thrilled to be able to provide trusted advice that's farmer centric, and being owned by farmers, and I'm just an employee. We don't need to, like so many carbon brokers, make an accelerated return to repay some risk capital of investors. Our job instead is to maximize the services and value to our members, and our members are all farmers. I guess it's easy enough to say those sorts of things, but I guess we take member benefit, and we've put that literally in our DNA, in our constitution of the organization, around what we aim to do, how we aim to do it, and that's kind of distilled into our 10 principles. We work well with those that want to actually work well with farmers, and we call bullshit on those that don't. Being a mutual, we have to be transparent with our members, and that means that we gravitate towards open source technology and transparency. We don't pretend to have all of the answers. Instead, we use well-trodden path of co-design and our member-based ownership to kind of navigate our way through the complexities of that convergence between climate, environment, and agriculture. The sorts of farmers that we typically work with, the 6.5, maybe 7,000 farm businesses in Australia that earn over 2 million a year in revenue, pretty much have the sophistication and the scale to be able to be self-proponents in carbon projects, for example. The smaller farms, where probably there's a dominance of off-farm income because it's less than 50,000 a year in revenue, they find some value in working with Regen Farmers Mutual. But our typical I was talking to a guy called Rob Pekin today, who described what we do as helping the messy, missing middle be able to get into environmental markets. And they're the farmers that earn typically more than 50,000 a year in revenue from the sale of wheat or wool or beef or whatever, and less than $2 million a year from the sales of those commodities. What we kind of understand is that at that scale of those sorts of farm family businesses between 50,000 and 2 million, is that the me needs the we. That by collectivizing and working together within the landscape, you can have impacts that go across farm boundaries and have a material difference to the environment. At best, when you incentivize sort of individuals, you get like pockets of biodiversity, but when you connect and you coordinate lots of farmers across a landscape, and you enable farmers to join in over time and over the landscape, well, then you can have a material benefit on hydrology and biodiversity and habitat distribution, etc. We also find that me needs we, because left to their own, a lot of those mid-size farmers, family farmers, have to bring in the expertise, and this way they share the costs of expertise and the fixed costs between them. Also, there's amazing advantages when farmers come together in terms of, we start typically with a group of farmers of about 10, and then with 10 farmers, you've got enough farmers there to support a regen advisor to be able to make a living out of the support. But so many businesses, well-intentioned or otherwise, I'm thinking of ag techs, for example, start off with 0 customers in a region, and then they work to get their first and their second and their third. And by the time they've kind of gone to their fourth, most of them are out of business. By starting with a peer group, you provide enough scale to make it economic for the individual farmers, but also enough scale to make it feasible for the regen advisors to assist them. And additionally, the scale and the ability maybe not to just do self-reporting, but to work as a group to report one another, provides the opportunity for proof of claims and certainty of those claims, and improves the validity of the data that's produced. And of course, when you're talking about 10 farms or 20 or 100 in a region, that aggregates the negotiating power to beyond what an individual farmer can usually get off their own bat. And this is why we work with groups, and it's why we've created our signature sort of product, which is the Landscape Impact Program. So what is that? Typically what happens is we onboard farmers and get to understand their emissions profile, carbon opportunity, biodiversity opportunity. We then work with the farmers and the working team to map within a geography. We go and we develop a thesis, but we want to test that with field trips. We gather inputs from buyers of the outcomes, and the buyers could be government buyers, in this case VCFP, or they could be corporate buyers, or they could be philanthropic buyers looking for social or conservation outcomes. And often what we're finding is that there's interventions at the enterprise, at the farm level, and at the landscape level, and buyers for those different outcomes. And so by being together, you get to access new buyers that you wouldn't be able to do on your own. At the end of the Landscape Impact Program, we've got collateral that assists farmers to create a landscape scale transaction. The core purpose of a Landscape Impact Program is to answer the question, what can we do individually and collectively that makes a material environmental impact and is also economically sustainable for the farmers? So that conforms with our definition of regen, which is to make an economic and environmental profit. We think if you make an economic profit and a environmental loss, you probably mining your natural capital. And if you make an environmental profit and an economic loss, that's at best conservation. It's not regenerative agriculture. For regenerative agriculture, you need both an economic and an environmental outcome. And of course, we've just talked to the benefits of working across farms, across landscapes, with multiple farmers. And typically what happens is our pilot 10 prove what's happening, and then tranches open up annually that enable more farmers to come into essentially a blueprinted pathway. We typically work with locals in specialized roles of a working team of 5. So there's a cat herder, a regen advisor, a business and finance, a marketing, and a farmer avatar. And they work with 10 farmers in the local land care group and the local CMA, additional experts and consultants, and they come up with that process that I referred to earlier over 20 weeks. They they get to determine what a landscape impact in their context, in their landscape looks like. Why isn't that scrolling down? Maybe because I didn't add enough to it. So I'll stop sharing and just talk to how the VCFP fits in to what we're proposing as an organisation. And that's largely that the VCFP offers the opportunity for us to provide 9, maybe a dozen assessments for individual farmers, with the idea of trying to find closely located farmers, concentrations that might in themselves be the nucleus to create a landscape impact program. And leveraging the carbon farming program along with available resources for supply chain and meeting their requirements, banking and meeting their requirements, biodiversity and their emerging markets, and carbon via the ERF. And so I guess our idea is, yes, we want to help individuals with the Victorian carbon farming pilot project, but we are looking at individuals that are predisposed to working with their neighbours, working with those in the similar landscape to create a more material environmental impact that probably goes beyond the 10 years of this program, but extends into what we'd like to call regenerative agricultural landscapes. And that's our kind of description of RFM and our project. In terms of how to advance, if you're interested in working with us, we welcome emails. I'm Andrew at Regen Farmers Mutual, and our RPA advisor for those 9 to 12 that we can take on at the moment is Amanda at Regen Farmers Mutual. Unfortunately, Amanda's not available tonight to join us. She is at Wilmot Field Days in northern New South Wales. And but typically, if you email or call us, we'll connect you and try and find a match and find out whether we're a suitable provider for you. And that's us. So I think I'm the third of the three. Robin, do you want me to switch back to you, or shall we go to questions in the chat?
I think we can just open it up to questions, Wardy. I think that's the way to go. Yep.
I'm happy to jump in there, Wardy, and have a crack at the ones that are on there if you like.
Please do.
I'll answer them to the best of my ability. Robin, I'm not sure if you're empowered tonight to answer anything on behalf of the department, but obviously if people want the word from DECA rather than from a registered provider, then that is on the website, the contact details. But yeah, take my advice with the proviso that it's worth checking in with the department. So looking at Tony's question about harvesting all of the trees after 10 years, my understanding of the project, Tony, and I'll use that lawyer's phrase there for you, is that after 10 years, you can do whatever you like, that the Victorian Carbon Farming Program is designed in such a way that that it really only requires that permanence for the first 10 years, and that's what they're counting on. And so in terms of what's required of project proponents, after 10 years, it's up to the landowner what they do with their trees. So so while that probably wouldn't be Wood for Good's prescription in terms of landscape health or anything else, my understanding is that yeah, that would be allowed. In terms of Julie's question, is grazing allowed along with the plantation for animal health? The answer is, in short, yes, Julie, but there's a but, and essentially that pertains to the extent to which the trees survive. So there's a period of time where the trees are probably much younger than you would allow the animals in there to graze, and also animals that have perhaps nutrition deficiencies, or maybe just are curious and playful. They will tend to eat bark or rub against bark and things like that as well. So even with mature trees, that can have material impacts on the survival of the trees. So yes, with the proviso that if the trees aren't damaged. And so my recommendation would be, to work with your animals and with the trees to make sure that you're grazing sensitively around them, and that those animals aren't allowed in there so such a long period of time that they damage the trees. A question from Catherine. I'm assuming Catherine's in Mitchell Shire because she's asking if the program covers all of Victoria and is Mitchell Shire included. So this is a pilot just in the North Central Catchment Management Region. I think Mitchell might be in the Goulburn Catchment Management Region. Someone else might be able to update me there, but I'm pretty sure it's not in the North Central region. And my understanding as well is that it's planned to roll this program out more widely around the state. At the very least, at the end of the pilot project period, which is December this year. But I understand that the department has basically maintained, I guess, the right to roll it out further sooner or later than that date. So really, I think probably a good question for the team in at the carbon farming unit. And essentially, I dare say they wouldn't mind hearing from people from further around the state, because that helps them understand what the demand is out there, and it also helps them to design the future iterations as well. So I don't think it hurts to make contact with them if you want to get in the queue. We've got a big up from Peter in Beechworth saying thanks to the tree projects, done great work in Beechworth previously. And Tony has asked, I did actually just mention in regards to something that Wardy said, which is that you can actually access the VCFP and access other sources of carbon income. The state government has designed the program to stimulate carbon projects in Victoria. So they're not literally buying the carbon credits from you. This is really an incentive to create more carbon projects. And so if you want to work with a few other farmers and Regen Farmers Mutual to market your carbon together, there's really nothing stopping you doing both the VCFP and that. If you've got 50 hectares and you've got someone who wants to buy carbon credits from you in whatever manner, then again, there's nothing stopping you doing that. And Tony's asked, has there been any attempt to link the Victorian Carbon Farming Program with educational programs such as the Master Tree Grower courses? And not to my knowledge, I guess is my answer to that, Tony. I think, yeah, you may well, I think, be doing everyone a favour, for instance, if there was a Master Tree Grower course run that then also had, a group of people perhaps working together to put these submissions in with a registered provider or a number of registered providers. And Julie is saying that the Department of Agriculture within DECA needs to understand the importance of this within the farm zone. Julie, can you speak what in particular you're referring to there that they need to understand? You're welcome to type it or say it, I think.
I'm a qualified regenerative agriculturalist, and I work in farming zone to improve the soils, improve the viability of the farm, protect biodiversity, and to coordinate options for the farmer that don't include large-scale dryland cropping and grazing, which seems to be in the Department of Ag, is where they have a section in there that is the referral to councils in relation to planning permit applications, and they don't even think that agroforestry is actually part of agriculture.
That's good feedback, Robert. I'm not sure if you're in a position to provide that back to AgVic, but I certainly would agree, Julie, that we need to get tree farming on the radar of especially the government in Victoria, given the exit from native forestry, but also because we have such a highly developed landscape as well, that we do need more trees in it. In reference to the earlier question from Catherine about which regions are eligible, Narelle, who I think might be a land care coordinator, or perhaps works for North Central Catchment Management Authority, there we go, says that there is a part of Mitchell Shire that is within the CMA region, North Central CMA region. So you're welcome to grab Narelle's email there, Catherine, and just find out if you might be eligible. So are there any other questions from anyone? You're welcome to actually unmute yourself and speak rather than typing them in if you like.
I just had another one. The Department of Agriculture just produced a practice note for farm management plans for councils and consultants that are doing these reports, and they excluded climate change or any ability to mitigate climate change or carbon farming from that whole document.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, again, Robin, I don't know if in a position to take notes and provide that back to the ag unit within AgVic unit within DECA, but yeah, Julie, I think that's good feedback to get to them.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. I'll just jump in there. Yeah, I'll raise that with the Agriculture Victoria people, the concerns around not having climate in that space. So thank you for that feedback.
I did actually provide that feedback when they launched that practice note and didn't hear anything. So, but it actually meets certain clauses in the planning scheme as well.
Okay,
great. Thank you.
And Peter's got his hand up.
Yes, good evening. I just wanted to congratulate all the speakers. It's been a really interesting evening, but I hope you get to move on with your project, because I'm in northeast Victoria and I'm 75, and when you look at a 10-year project, it better be sooner than later.
Thanks for that, Peter. I'm sure Robin's taken note. I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, Robin.
Only, like I said at the top, it's been a process of development for this program, making sure all the settings are right, and I'm sure you can appreciate there's some complexity in the space, and that's why we're excited that we're at this point now where we're moving into this the registered project advisors sort of garnishing support and getting the word out there about the projects and grants available. So now's the time to start. There's a great quote, you know, if you plant a tree today, the best time was 20 years ago. Well, that the start for 20 years ago is today. So yeah, thanks very much for that, Peter.
I'll just jump in.
Can I do another quote before I finish? As the one who plants trees knowing that they'll never sit in their shade is starting to understand the meaning of life.
Good on you for introducing some philosophy into the evening, Peter.
And Peter, just to put it into perspective, last Wednesday I was out with Marsha Kay, who's 93, direct seeding trees at Murrum Bateman. So you're just a spring chicken, mate.
I'll do Narelle's question, then I'll come back to you, Julie, just to keep the microphone moving around. And Narelle is asking whether there's been any sites registered yet with the project. Robin, are you able to provide any feedback on that? Has there been any through to registration yet?
None as yet through to registration. Again, we're in this very preliminary sponsorship. We've sponsored some outreach activities, of which this is one. So as the word gets out there, then there'll be more. We're expecting there to be more linkages between landowners with the land available and the registered project advisors to start the project. So yeah, this is the start. So yeah, thanks for the question.
And we've got two very close at Wood for Good, Narelle. So watch this space. Julie, do you mind if I ask Pete to answer his question first, so we can keep it moving around? Great, thank you. Pete.
Oh, thanks, folks. I was at an open day at an agroforestry fellow's farm about maybe 6 or 7 years ago. I think his name was Howard. Lovely fellow, really committed to agroforestry, etc. And someone asked a question that I didn't follow up. And the question that came from the back was, yeah, okay, after all this though, are we then able to sell our trees? And the suggestion was that there might be government protocols, regulations that prevent the products of agroforestry being sold, somehow implicating that they might be locked into some sort of stability in terms of providing all the other things that agroforestry provides. And it's kind of a bit of a rough question, but I wonder whether there might be a response to that. How do people are there? Well, that's a posed question. What sort of government regulations are there on selling off, culling off agroforestry products?
Look, I'll jump in there and have my best swing. I'll invite my colleague Ben to jump in with further and better, or anyone else who might have further and better particulars. But essentially, if you're developing any kind of commercial plantation, including agroforestry, and so it can look very different to a blue gum plantation or whatever, then if it's over 5 hectares, you're required to register a plantation development notice. That is, I think it's a few $100s with your local council.
Sorry, you just broke up there. Can you repeat that, please, Seb?
So over 5 hectares, you're required to register the project with the local council with a plantation development notice. And that is a few $100s to formally register the fact that these trees have been planted for an economic use, and to empower you essentially down the track to do something with them. Less than 5 hectares, you'll find different provisions in different councils' planning schemes. And Julie's shaking her head, but we will find different provisions less than 5 hectares. And essentially, there's finer points in terms of whether the species that you're planting are endemic or not. So whether they're from the local area or not. If they're not endemic, in Victoria, you're pretty well got carte blanche. But if they're endemic, if they're from the local area, then you need to probably, to be on the safe side, to cover yourself, is probably register them anyway, even if it is under 5 hectares. So that would be my advice. And ironically, and Rowan Reid has noted this many times, that actually incentivizes people to plant non-endemic species. So where a property owner wants to plant trees to utilize and wants to get the best biodiversity value from the point of view that endemic species are going to have the best biodiversity value, you've actually made it very difficult for them. And so I think this is a good conversation to have, because the regulations in Victoria are very much focused on biodiversity. And so for landholders who want to do other things, they're not very enabling, and they definitely don't point in that direction. So I think as a community of practice, it's worth talking about that aspect, because I think we do need, especially now that if there's going to be a hardwood logs harvested in Victoria for use as a saw log or as timber or for renewable resources, then it's going to have to come from some form of plantation or farm forestry. And so I think we need to start really creating that conversation, that dialogue that starts to point to the need to develop fit for purpose regulation that makes it easy for landholders to participate in the transition to a renewable bioeconomy.
Thank you.
Julie, you might have a few points to correct me on there, but I think you also had a question. And you're on mute.
There is an exemption in the planning scheme in Victoria for man-planted plantations, even if they're using species that are indigenous to the area. You gain an exemption to remove them and not have to deal with offsets. So clearly, with establishing the plantation, you just document all that. If you haven't registered with council, and you just apply for that exemption. I've worked in native fish for 29 years, and it's always been in the clauses, never been taken out. The other thing is that being a bushfire planner, I was doing a plantation for a property owner, not in North Central, but the next one over in Wimmera, and I was looking at the code of practice for forestry, and there is no requirement for separation distances for two dwellings on the existing lot and adjacent lots, although there was in Western Australia did have a code of practice for that. So looking at putting up a plantation, we need to consider what the risk is that we're proposing to any other dwellings or infrastructure on adjacent lots as well. But it's just unfortunate we don't have that. But technically, as a bushfire planner, we try and keep that risk down to the lowest bell level. And it's just one of those things that just hasn't been put together. And it's very contentious at the moment. So even if we put in a farm management plan, if we put agroforestry, then CFA won't approve our development because we're increasing the risk on the land. So yeah, I just wondered if you sort of come across that before.
No, it hasn't been an issue for projects that we've worked on. And I can't think of anywhere we've been planting in proximity to dwellings that would cause, I think, that kind of bushfire attack consideration. But I do know, of course, that there's provisions in the planning scheme. So I think building a house around trees is very well provided for. Are there any other questions? If not, then your registered project advisors might have an early mark off to clean their teeth and go and read a book or get to bed or have a glass of sherry or port.
Looking forward to hearing from some people, hopefully.
Yeah, I might just round it out and say, yeah, if anybody here is interested, the first port of call is obviously to get in touch with one of the registered project advisors and discuss your planting proposals with them. Obviously, the program is very flexible. It's designed around landowner needs sort of first and foremost. So yeah, that would be your first point of call. And yeah, we're super excited again to have the program up and running as the pilot there in North Central Catchment Management Authority. I noticed there were some questions on what happens sort of next and as it would expand to other areas. There's actually, if you go to the website, there's a link available to sign up to a mailing list. So if you haven't done that, you can get yourself on our VCFP mailing list. And when the project or after we've done our due evaluation on the pilot outcomes, if the program goes beyond the borders of the North Central Catchment Management Authority area region or area region, I never get the acronym right. Then you'll be advised via that mail out list. So yeah, I'd small plug for that. Otherwise, it's been excellent to hear from all of our project advisors in one.
Robin, before we close.
Yes, Tony.
Can I just follow on from something you just said about getting in touch with the advisors?
Yes.
Does that apply only for the North Central region, or can people from the rest of the state also get in touch with these advisors?
Well, at the moment, projects will only be funded within the North Central Catchment Management Authority region. So I'm guessing, depending on the resourcing available in the registered project advisors, they'll be willing to examine options in other areas at the current time. But I imagine, for the most part, it'll be people from the North Central Catchment Management Authority area. And yes, I note that Murrindindi Shire are going through that future workshops. So yes, it'll be a bit of a watch this space in Murrindindi, Tony. So, but yeah, I appreciate the question.
Thanks.
Yes, otherwise, excellent to see everybody here tonight. I hope you got a bit out of it, and yes, proceed to plant trees would be my final comment. And also have a very good evening and good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Wardy.